what to look for when buying a TV. I'm hoping this can just give you a little bit of perspective. Maybe you're new here and you just want help in buying a TV. I'm just going to share what I typically look for and how it might apply to you. So basically, what I'm looking to do at my home is I'm looking to make a pseudo home theater set. I say pseudo because of the fact that all I'm really buying is a new soundbar and a new TV. I'm just going to talk about the TV in this particular case. And every time I buy a new piece of tech, a new piece of equipment, I research the hell out of it. I go through so many sites. I look at what makes a piece of equipment quality, what makes it not so quality. And I use a few sites to help do that. I'll link one of them down in the description below. It's ratings.com, RTINGS.com. I use it to look up a lot of my tech, my headphones that I just bought, my Razer Upper Wireless headphones, and also TVs as well. But I researched that site for my current TV, which is a TCL 6 Series 4K 60, I believe it currently operates at. It's been a great TV, but with new gaming consoles like the PS5 and the Xbox Series X coming out, I wanted to grab a TV that was as future proof as possible, at least as future proof for now, that could support 4K 120 frames. But I'm going to skip the jargon for now. I'm just stick with me here just for a second. So it all comes down to this. You have to figure out for you what's important in a TV. What are you going to use it for? Are you going to use it for a monitor? Are you going to use it to watch movies? Are you going to use it to watch TV shows, play video games? Whatever it might be, you have to find what use case you're going to use it for. For me, I use it for everything. I use it for, like I said, movies, video games, TV shows, and even sometimes as a monitor if I'm feeling really spicy. But basically, I'm looking for a jack of all trades TV, which is why I think this topic might be helpful for you. So basically, for a TV, a general rule of thumb that you can apply to any TV is that it has to have two really solid metrics, one of which is refresh rate, the second of which is resolution. And if you're a hard gamer like myself, HDMI 2.1 ports are going to be a must for next generation consoles. So I think out of all three of those, the combination of the three is going to get you an awesome TV if all three are great. But I think the number one out of all three of those is going to be a really good refresh rate. Some of you might be wondering who are newer TVs, what is refresh rate? Refresh rate is essentially the number of frames per second that your TV can play, putting it simply. How many frames of motion is captured by the TV in a second? So basically, if I go like this, basically my camera is capturing the wave of my hand motion 60 frames per second, meaning it's capturing a lot more of the micro movements and not creating as much of a motion blur as it might normally create. For those of you who are sensitive to that kind of thing, motion blur is essentially when an object is moving really, really fast. You don't continue to see the object in its entirety, meaning that you'll see a little bit of a blur because they're moving so fast. If you were to watch Usain Bolt run, he's pumping his arms so fast, you're not going to see his arms highly defined the entire time. Why? Because they're going to be moving so fast that they're blurred. When you've got a TV that has a high refresh rate, it mitigates that a little bit. It helps your eye kind of decipher that difference. So if you watch Usain Bolt on a TV that has a refresh rate of 120 hertz or 120 frames per second, you're probably going to see his arms to be a lot more better defined, and it's going to make the viewing experience a lot more pleasant because you'll still see all the finer details even though it's moving at a pretty high speed. So that's why refresh rate, at least to me, is so important. It gets rid of that motion blur and it really helps ease the eye in seeing all the finer details as characters in movies, TV shows, and games are moving. It really helps capture some of that nuance as well. And the best part about refresh rate, which kind of trumps it over resolution for me, is the fact that at no matter what distance, at least I know, I'm not going to claim to be an expert on everything TVs. This is just me sharing my personal experience with you guys to help you out. But from what I understand about refresh rate is that no matter what distance you're looking at refresh rate at, it doesn't matter. So basically, you could be sitting 10 feet away from your TV, you'll notice a great refresh rate. You could be sitting 2 feet from your TV, you'll notice a great refresh rate. The problem with having 4K resolution in a TV, well, first of all, there's no problem with having 4K resolution in a TV. I always recommend a high resolution, but when you're sitting too far away from the TV, you actually won't notice the higher resolution as much. So, for example, I have a 55-inch TV currently in my room. I sit about 6 to 7 feet away from the TV, and to be honest, I can't really notice the 4K definition because I'm sitting too far away from the TV. And basically, how that works is the bigger your TV is, the further away you can sit away from it and still notice the difference between a high definition TV and a 4K TV. A high definition TV is one that's qualified as 1080 pixels, essentially. And that's what really makes refresh rate so much more important is it doesn't matter how far away or how close you sit away from the TV, you'll notice refresh rate. But with resolution, the further away you sit from it, the less of the resolution you really notice, making it a lot less important. Because if you're sitting far away from your TV, you're not really going to notice the difference in resolution anyway. The caveat to that is if you have a ginormous TV, like say you have an 80-inch TV in your room and you're only sitting 6 feet away from it, you'll notice both that 120 frames per second refresh rate, and you'll also notice the 4K resolution. Why? Because the bigger the TV gets, the further away you can sit away from it to capture your for your eyes to capture the difference between 1080p, that's high definition TVs, and 4K TVs. So that's a really long drawn out explanation as to why I think refresh rate is the more important of the two between that and resolution. So that's something to keep in mind. So what I'm trying to tell you is if you are buying a TV that you're going to be sitting really far away from, I highly recommend focusing on refresh rate when trying to buy a TV, much rather than resolution. If you're going to be sitting relatively close, or you're just going to say, to hell with it, I'm buying an 80-inch TV, then by all means, go for both. I might be in the latter category. I might just go ahead and buy a 77-inch TV and just enjoy the heck out of both because I watch movies and play video games and watch TV a lot. So why not invest a little bit more and enjoy a little bit more into that experience? But like I said, to each their own. This is all subjective, and you got to do what's best for your viewing experience. One other plug I want to say for refresh rate too, for those of you who might be skeptical, especially for those of you who are gamers. I even believe Phil Spencer said this. I'm trying to remember which episode of IGN's Podcast Unlocked I listened to, but I believe one of the journalists mentioned that even Phil Spencer was really touting refresh rate as being the more important of the two metrics because for the aforementioned reasons, like I said, no matter what distance you're viewing your games at, when you've got a high refresh rate, you'll notice it. And plus, when you're playing video games, a lot of things you're doing are moving at a very fast pace. And in order to get rid of that motion blur, it's really going to let you play the game, especially if you're experiencing it with a multiplayer setting. You're really going to notice the subtle nuances and movements and have a much more pleasurable experience at a higher refresh rate. So even like the biggest, best, brightest minds of the gaming industry even tout having a higher refresh rate. So that's just something to keep in mind going overall. If you don't quite believe me or don't quite grasp what exactly I'm talking about, I want you to try this experiment. If you have a gaming console, if you have an Xbox like I do, and I believe you can even do this on a PlayStation, reset your console to, or I'm sorry, adjust your settings on your console to run at high definition, that's 1080 pixels, and then also change the refresh rate to 60 hertz or 60 frames per second, and then play your game again. You'll notice the difference between adjusting the definition and keeping refresh rate the same, how much smoother your gameplay is going to look when it's got a lower resolution and a higher refresh rate rather than making it do both. It's a really interesting experiment that I highly recommend trying if you're wanting to see what the impact on refresh rate is. Or if you just want to adjust the fresh rate on its own, you can do that on your Xbox as well. But I highly recommend it. And if you do, ladies and gentlemen, feel free to jump down in the comments below and let me know whatever your thoughts are and how the experiment goes. So basically, at the end of the day, for my particular use case, for me, refresh rate is over everything. It's the number one most important thing for me when looking at a TV and you want it to have the best viewing experience. So if you're going out to buy a TV, the best refresh rates I believe on the market are 120 hertz or 120 frames per second. So that's just to kind of sum it up in one line for you right here. But like I said, adjust your needs accordingly because you might use your TV for something different than I might be using it for. So that's just something to keep in mind. And with all those things in mind, like I said, I've already done a ton of research on buying TVs. I pretty much know exactly which one I get. I'm going to get the LG CX OLED TV, the 2020 model. The reason being is because it's got all three of the criteria I listed out, and it's got the right size that I need to. It's got 120 hertz refresh rate. It's got a 4K resolution, which I absolutely love, and it supports HDMI 2.1, which I believe I forgot to touch on that, so I'm just going to take a second to just recap what exactly HDMI 2.1 is. HDMI 2.1 is a port that is essentially the newest on the market that is able to capture both a really high resolution and a really high refresh rate. HDMI 2.1 currently supports 4K systems and also 120 hertz systems, which if I buy an Xbox Series X, it's going to run at both. And so I want the TV to be able to handle what the Xbox Series X is bringing. And that's why that TV is going to be best for me. Plus, I watch movies, like I said, a lot. It's got a really high refresh rate and it reduces some of the motion blur that I see in my action movies, like Tenet and things along those lines. So I think for those reasons, I'm going to go with LG CX OLED TV. I'm deciding between 77 inches and 65 because I want it to be a home theater like experience. Like I said, it all depends on what you're looking for. For me, I'm looking for a jack of all trades experience, and that includes movies. The bigger screen you can watch on a movie, the better experience you'll probably have, at least in my opinion. But I think a lot of film fans and lovers might agree. But like I said, it's all up to what's within your budget, what you're into, what your use cases are. So that's just something to keep in mind overall. Ladies and gentlemen, what is your favorite TV, or what metrics do you look for when buying a TV? Has this little blurb or my personal experience with you helped? Feel free to jump down in the comments below and let me know your thoughts. And also, to talk a little bit more about what I mean with viewing distance and resolution, I'm actually going to link a nice article in the description below from Sony that actually details like a nice graph as to how far away you can sit from your TV based on the resolution of it. So keep that in mind. I hope this helps, and let me know how your TV experience is going.